Okay, let's do this one. Throwback to more than half a year ago, where this tweet single-handedly made one of the most popular phrases in gacha gaming history, aside from Death Lizard, which is also gonna be yellow. Today, I do want to revisit this topic because no one else has been talking about it, and I think it's about time the community gives credit where credit is due. Enough hate, enough problems, enough 7 out of 10. And let us rejoice in the glory of Honkai Star Rail, which is how they solved the power creep problem. Hey guys, MrPokke here. I just started out this idea a little bit as like a shit post, but the more I was cooking, I was like, wait, he's actually cooking. So do enjoy the ride with me and let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think we can all agree that the gacha community is not exactly the most agreeable bunch of people. People have been cancelled over their takes in meta as well as tier lists, and now even story ratings, which is inherently a subjective opinion, but let's not poke the beehive today. To start off this journey, I do want to restate the context that on January 7th, when I made this greedy and stupid tweet, I was never denying the existence of power creep for the 10,000 billionth time, but rather the problems associated with power creep. Power creep exists, yes, absolutely. But whether or not power creep is a problem is not just dependent on the big bag online casino with the PNG waifus. On top of that, we do have the individuals as well, which is why some free-to-plays can fully clear the endgame content exceptionally well, while there are other whales that can barely 2-star. If power creep was a problem only by the company, then no free-to-plays in the world would be able to beat the endgame. It really is just that simple. Sure, you can say that free-to-plays might be playing the game more. Oh my god, they're playing the game. They study the meta or they were lucky with their pulls, but you also cannot deny at the same time that for every single sweaty free-to-play is pretty much gonna be balanced by a less sweaty spender. The yin to the yang, the balance of equilibrium as well as the cycle of free-to-plays and spenders. This is how I would judge a gacha game's health. If the endgame can only be cleared by spenders while studying the meta as well as being sweaty, then free-to-plays will quit because they will stand absolutely no chance. Likewise, if the free-to-plays can easily clear the endgame with their exact same team from years ago, then spenders will lose a pretty big incentive to spend in the first place because they don't really have to change this thing called the meta, which is not existent anymore. But here lies the cause of power creep by the company's decision to drive sales as well as revenue, which is the shield and artificial environments to improve a rate-up unit's performance. You might not need a specific unit to clear, but it sure as hell creates a lot of FOMO, doesn't it? See that Castrius Hyacinth tribute team full auto clearing with zero pressure on your sustain? See that final zero cycling Aventurine with literally free units and no problems whatsoever? How about the upcoming DOT team comp with 5 billion upgraded benefits from the reworked Kafka and Hyacinths on top of a burn memory of chaos debuff? You don't even have to look at just Honkai Star Rail. Literally every single gacha game in the world, be it PvP or PvE focused, that does this, but particularly for PvE focused gacha games because PvP gachas drive sales with leaderboards rewards FOMO, so PvE has to come out with something else, which is where power creep comes into play for Honkai Star Rail, making new units clearing faster and cooler than the last time with their respective shield environments. So why do I say that Honkai Star Rail solved the power creep problem? Enter Amphorius.
The children of humankind, known as the Chrysos heirs, shall pluck the gods' core flames, and once more uphold the world.
Or more specifically, enter version 3.0. At this point, y'all can go ahead and type up the Hoyo Shield, HSR Shield, Grifter, whatever kind of comments down below. I'll go ahead and explain this concept with 3 main points, and please let me know what you guys think as well. So the first aspect is actually going to be team building. If you have been playing Honkai Star Rail for a while, especially around the time when version 3.0 started, I think you would have come across a couple of takes where version 3 units have been relatively well balanced, perhaps a little bit too balanced, except for Pollux. Damn. I don't really think I've seen the same phenomenon with version 2 compared to version 1, and namely that's because our support roster at the start of the game was going to be a lot smaller in order to create an environment that allows for multiple DPSs to perform similarly in the endgame content. We essentially only had Robin and Rame as the main supports, with Sparkle seeing some play for hyper carry, at least that's until Sunday came out in version 2.7. With the introduction of Remembrance MC, which is free by the way, as well as Tribi, we now have access to 5 powerhouse support units while still having only 2 team endgame content at least until version 3.6 comes out. This means that as of version 3, a player's degree of team building flexibility is going to be a lot higher compared to version 2 and even more so compared to version 1 where we literally only had Ranmei. You could say that back in version 1.6, Ranmei was the closest thing to a must pull because every other team without Ranmei pales in comparison. Because what else were you going to use realistically? Asta? Yukong? Hanya? And when Robin and HMC came out, we also saw the alternative comp of Super Break, opening the path for 1 crit DPS with Robin and 1 Super Break DPS with Ranmei. Now that we have RMC, Sunday and Tribi, the options are more than ever, meaning that more DPSs can see play compared to the past. Heck, we have the infamous Tricycle team comp which can literally make any DPS work because this team comp just synergizes perfectly by itself to the point where that 4th slot just does not matter. Even Sparkle seeing a little bit of a play for those Sparkle pullers is gonna be more common now, especially with the introduction of the free DPS Archer, which works exceptionally well in all of the Memory of Chaos as well as Epoch Shadows. Which was extremely compatible with Sparkle while performing exceptionally well in Memory of Chaos as well as Epoch Shadows. And on top of everything, this probably deserves to be a point of its own, but it's so straightforward that I don't think anyone is going to argue with this. We also saw the first ever wave of reworked units for version 1, 2 of which has seen exceptional placement, namely Kafka with DOT's rework as well as the upcoming High Students, as well as Silver Wolf, which is going to be a lot stronger when I'm going to be pairing her with pretty much any single team comp in the game. You could also say that Blade and Jingliu were decent alternatives for Sunday owners that did not manage to slot Sunday in after using Cassius or D-Herda pairing them with Tribi. On top of that, we also know that they plan to introduce even more buffs for older characters, so who knows what is going to happen to the older units going forward. My point is, team building in Honkai Star Rail is getting easier over time because your support options as a player is expanding within the game of Honkai Support Rail, while the endgame demand for team comps has been pretty much around the same every single time, and luckily the upcoming 3-team endgame content will not have strategies or the free-to-players will ride again. Or maybe they will still ride, who knows at that point of time, right? Unless you put literally 0 support units and just all in DPS, you can definitely cook up a team comp with the amount of strategies that you have spent in Honkai Star Rail. Speaking of strategies, this is where the second part comes in. Because of the nature of gacha as well as its FOMO mechanics, it is ultimately up to the players to recognize that, hey, chasing meta, especially for a shield PvE environment just to have an easier time clearing the endgame is illogical. You are literally getting back less than 10 pulls for the endgame full star clear that goes away once every 6 weeks, while spending 80, 90, 100, 160 pulls just for that specific rotation. For Genshin, Watering Waves as well as Xenoblade Zone 0, a player's expression of skill can circumvent this a little bit better with your dodge, your parries, your negative edge, aerial combat, Kara cancel, all that kind of stuff. But Honkai Star Rail is pretty much 80% team building with more or less 20-30% in your gameplay and builds. You can't upscale our current adventuring mechanics by dodging his dices, nor can you dodge like Polak's massive little HP drain and just break through his toughness with like sheer brute force. So you either play with the mechanics that the game provides for you, or you just basically have a team so strong that you can just bypass the mechanics completely. The best example I can think of is a Hearthstone player trying to climb to legend rank in WoW rank with their decks from 8 years ago while refusing to pull for new cards.
Alright, let's duel! I summon this! Queen's Knight in defense mode! Next I'll place 1 card face down. And that's all.
At some point, your skill can no longer bring you beyond the content you're against in a turn-based game, because at the end of the day, turn-based game is always about team building. But here's the thing, Honkai Star Rail's endgame is constantly rotating. Outside of Shilling, these enemies do come back, so Sarok, True Sting, Aventurine, Hule, Kafka, just to list a few, although I do kinda miss my man Yanqing. They are all endgame bosses that are designed with a specific unit in mind back in those days, meaning that the moment they do come back, units that tend to perform against them last time will still perform relatively well despite the increased HP inflation, because the Memory of Chaos buffs also gets buffed correspondingly. Notice how our previous video for HP inflation, where we used the literal exact same DOT team team from 8 months ago versus today, and we still clear in the exact same number of cycles despite an over 100% HP inflation for Savro as well as the Wolf. On top of that, who do you think is the real winner for HSR Endgame? The guy that spent 100 pools chasing mana and getting the easy clear, or the guy that saved 100 pools sticking to the teams they like and using these pools on a non-greedy and stupid fashion, such as vertical investments into Honkai Saporio or even into the DPSs. There's a reason why Honkai Star has roughly more than 80 pools every single patch, because this is roughly the amount to guarantee a soft pity in a unit that you want to pull for that patch. For every comparison made that HSR's endgame is getting harder for the exact same teams from months or even years ago, you should also consider that if these players had used the exact same team, then it would have meant they have saved up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pools over the past couple of months, and eventually in the future, the moment they want to pull for a brand new team comp, they are always going to increase the performance once again, because that's how the game works for the endgame. Does it suck that the exact same team comp that you use like Scylla, Tingling, Bronya, and Bailu isn't clearing the endgame anymore? Oh, absolutely. But then I turn around and I look at the amount of Stellar Jades and pools I've saved by not pulling, and suddenly I'm thinking to myself, wait, it doesn't suck as bad anymore. If you were to ask me, I would rather be using my same DPS and have more than 300 and 400 over save pools and eventually completely pivoting to a brand new archetype for that version instead of chasing the latest DPS every 6 weeks for the endgame for the easier 3-star experience. Notice I did say DPS because Honkai support rail, Honkai support rail, Honkai support rail, Honkai support rail. I think at this point you guys Honkai support rail. Of course, for those unlucky players hitting hard pity every single time, I am terribly sorry for your loss, but welcome to the online casino. I am definitely waiting for the day they're going to removing 50-50 or making SSRs at 10%, but until the day happens, damn. This is why I say never ever chase meta in HSR, especially not in HSR, because if you're always looking for the easiest team, easiest meta for the endgame every single 6 weeks, at some point of time you're probably going to be running out of Stellar Jades or start spending money. And that's literally how a gacha game works, playing into your greed and stupidity. And that is completely fine, because guess what? You as a player are up against a multi-billion-dollar industry, the gacha industry, with hundreds and thousands of market analysts or even psychologists hired with a full-time job and salary to study behavioral trends and data to create the best possible banner for the market. It is okay to admit that you're probably not going to be outsmarting the entire department, but with acceptance comes knowledge, and with knowledge comes power. And here comes my third and final point to drive everything home. With the improved team building options as well as the income balance for the endgame rotation, HSR's version 3 has the most balanced class of DPS out of every version so far. And DPS is especially important because that's where the marketing budget lies. They are the forefront of absolute cinema in every single story, in their animations, in their lore, in their build-up, even in their IRL merch. Look at the Kazris controller or the Firefly controller, right? All that kind of stuff. You don't really need to try to sell tribute to someone that plays the game, but you definitely want to try and sell a different DPS because they have the most competition within a turn-based game. From Dihurda, Aglaya, Maide, Kazris, Anexa, Finon, Fake Colette, and now Hystidence, for every single one of these DPS that has been released in the same batch, you can kind of see them as the class of version 3. An issue that the class of version 2 had back in the days was Acheron's dominance was so overwhelming that it made the class of version 1 look like retired uncles ready to go back in the bed. She also introduced our first ever Nihility crit DPS, we're not going to talk about crit DPS here, Wolf, which offered very little alternatives at least until Robin comes in, so future version 2 DPS like Fei Xia and Yunli has to be around Acheron's caliber of strength, making version 1 DPSs feel even weaker in contrast. On top of that, she even has a versatility as well as vertical upgrades to her supports like your Jiao Qiu, your Cypher, and even now the reworked Serwolf. Now, one good thing about version 2 was Super Break, because that was the best introduction for brand new free-to-plays and casuals with a built-in easy-to-use kit, and you had the option of choosing any 3 break DPS, unless you put all 3. And I don't know what's going on, right? But we all know which one of them had the highest budget, which coincidentally tied with the best performing E2. Now that being said, Super Break is basically the training wheels of HSR, and once the training wheels come off, they come off pretty hard. For version 3, every single one of these DPSs have been performing relatively close compared to the class of version 2, and it really just boils down to which DPS has the more recent support upgrade. It started with Anexa with Dihurda, then Hyacinth to Kazris, and likely when Finon gets Saridra, he will set a new bar to be a DPS getting an upgrade again. But the DPS themselves, they are fundamentally around the same caliber because the others have not received more vertical investments such as Aglaya and Maide, both of which are still performing performing decently well. And somehow, Anexa is potentially even destroying the Herda from Memory of Chaos and Epoch Shadows. So there's that. When comparing the class of version 3 to version 2, the version 2 DPS roster didn't really felt like a retirement home treatment compared to how version 2 did to version 1, with your Uncle Dale, your Grandma Jingliu completely wiped out the face of the internet, at least in their DPS performance. Even now, Acheron, Fei Xiao, and Yunli and the Super Breakers on version 2 are still clearing the endgame, especially with the introduction of version 3 supports such as Tribi and Cypher. Speaking of version 3 supports, they also made a version 2 and even version 1 DPSs come close to the par by the power of Tricycle Team. There hasn't really ever been a mass pool DPS, even with Castri's global passive, so as long as you play Honkai support real and structure a team around the new version support, you're almost definitely going to be clearing the endgame unless you're running those +6 relics or like level 6 tracers, and if you have been playing since day 1. I would dare say that HSR's meta has been the best in version 3 compared to both version 2 and version 1, with version 2 having too big of a power spike and version 1 not having enough options to begin with. With all of these factors, I don't think it's surprising that despite the massive 100% HP inflation, despite the new units with brand new mechanics and flashier animations and cooler moves, despite the Doom posting about the upcoming units and 10 different global passives, now HSR is gonna end of service because powercreep has completely made this game unplayable, it is still undeniable that the endgame difficulty in HSR has never strictly went up. Instead, it's actually rotating between its ups and downs, especially when the player does not have access to every single team comp. If powercreep has truly ruined Honkai Star Rail, then we'll be seeing new endgame rotations being more and more difficult compared to the previous rotation where no free-to-play or casual can even clear a single endgame anymore. As I close off this video, I must admit I have been playing a lot of different new gachas outside of HSR for the past few months, such as Epic 7, ETF Restart, and now Umamu. Uma Musume, which gave me a lot of perspective as well as insights to gachas in general. I'm all for calling out problems within the game itself because that's how devs can listen and improve the game that we all enjoy. But I do hope that at least for those of you who has watched this video all the way to the end with good intentions, that you can separate the differences of a HSR problem and a gacha game problem. I do think that HSR needs a 3-team endgame, which is already going to be coming. I still think older units needs more rework to make them feel better to play without inducing FOMO, for example, Scylla and Argenti, and I think some of HSR's AI is literally dented, so they definitely need to fix that. And generally speaking, HSR, you're a multi-million dollar company, so maybe we can get a couple of these budgets to dedicate for some better storytelling. What the f***? Better animations, just send out a movie or something, that would be absolute cinema, right? Better riggings, look at Zenless Zone Zero, right? Take a couple of lessons from Zenless Zone Zero, all that kind of stuff. And if you still believe that I'm a HSR or a Hoyo shill, then it is what it is. But if you think what I said makes sense, then I'm glad that I could share my perspective with you. With that, that's all we have for today's content. Obligatory, this is just my personal opinion. Please don't cancel me because this has been love, peace, and happiness. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. All the best for your gacha pools. Use code POKE for 10% off gamers out. Join our Patreon, Twitch, YouTube, Discord, all that kind of stuff. And I'll see you guys next time. Venture forth to hunt!